Chapter 9. Earth Sight and Heaven Sight. Very soon we began to walk up the hill and out of the valley. Gradually the light from the creative substance grew less, until I could see it no more. I could not resist standing still to look down into the valley as it appeared to flame and sparkle in its draping of fiery snow. It had been a wonderful experience. I resolved to return when I was free to come and go at will, to seek out Stephen and to ask him to introduce me to his friends. I knew that they were all either working blissfully on building to that pattern of the Father, or else collecting and arranging the delicious food in preparation for the children's treats. It was indeed a happy place. "I suppose you're glad to be in the cool air again?" my guide asked slyly. I turned and met the twinkle in her eyes. "No wonder you smiled when I complained about the heat and the cooking odours. Why did you not tell me what it was really like? Why did you not reach out for the information for yourself?" she countered, adding wisely, "That is why Earth people remain so ignorant of heaven's joy. They are born to preconceived ideas. In their conceit they think that they know all and see all. This prevents them from gaining truth before they come here." "Could they attain to any knowledge of heaven there?" "Yes." She relapsed into silence as we walked on, so I decided to prompt her. "Give me an instance, then." "Consider the appearance and shape of an ordinary earth tree. What is it like?" "Well," I fumbled for words, "like a great beam of wood rising from the ground, with smaller beams sticking out of it, and having green leaves. Oh, I'm afraid I cannot describe it very well." "Has it no root?" She smiled. "If not, what keeps it standing, and how is it fed?" "Of course it has a root, only you can't see it." "I can," said my guide, "but you have described a tree in the summer." "Oh yes, well, in the autumn the leaves change colour and begin to fall, and the winter there are no leaves at all, but only bare branches. In the spring there are small buds." "Then you have described 4 trees?" "I asked for the description of one." "But it is one," I protested, "only it looks different during the seasons of the year." She turned to look at me. The twinkle was still there. "Where did the buds come from, then? You said in the winter the trees are bare. Are they added afterwards as a bird flies down and settles on a bough?" "No, of course not. They just come," I finished lamely. "You mean they are not added?" "No." "Then they must have been there all the time." "Yes, I suppose so." I was beginning to feel puzzled and confused. "That is what I mean," she said composedly, looking down with a little smile as she walked. I was just starting to be annoyed when I remembered that twinkle in her eye. Besides, is one ever annoyed with an angel, even of the lowest order? I was not sure. All at once she burst into a rippling laugh like a bird's song. "It is a shame to tease you. You see, I am trying to make you see the blindness of Earth people. A tree appears to be like a beam standing up with smaller beams but no leaves in winter, and yet you yourself admit it has hidden root and hidden leaves somewhere. They look at it and say knowingly, that is a tree, and when the leaves appear they say, the tree has changed. But hasn't it changed? Not really in our eyes. You see, in heaven we see everything as it is, and not as it appears. So that when we see a tree on earth or in heaven, we see all of it and not just part of it. A tree in heaven looks just like the tree on earth to me. That is because you have not yet learned to look with heavenly sight," she said so triumphantly. "That is why you did not reach out for the information about the hall of food, because you had your own mental picture of it. You thought you knew already." "I think I'm beginning to understand. It is a question of dropping preconceived ideas and really looking at things. And people," she agreed. "That is why we guides are so happy and hopeful about our charges. When they first come here, we see not only what they are, but all that they will be when they have made reparation, donned the robe, entered the gates, learned the lessons, ascended the heights." "You can see all that?" I gasped, looking at her with new respect. "Well, that is a great comfort." "It is more than that. No angel can look upon a man, however earthbound he may be, without prostrating his spirit before the Father in gratitude and awe. Indeed, every glance of an angel towards a man, even when he is on earth, is a hymn of worship to the great Creator. If, when on earth, you had seen a magnificent picture side by side with a piece of rough canvas it once was, you would understand a little of what I mean. I think I understand a little even now. My voice was low with wonderment. This being who seemed so ordinary and was so homely could see so much. Then a new aspect flashed upon me. Just as a glance at a man from the eyes of an angel was an act of praise to the Father, so a glance at an angel from the eyes of a man was a prayer of homage. Thus the silent interchange, hidden and usually unknown, between a man and his guardian angel on earth, was an unending hymn of praise and glory to God, every moment of life to the very end. It was an awesome thought. By the way, you have never told me your name, I ventured after we had journeyed some way in silence. I knew you would ask me that eventually, but if I told you my name, you would not even hear the tones of my voice as I uttered it. Why not? Because all angels are named by the Father, and when he gives us our names, he speaks in the heavenly language that is too high for the newcomer to hear or understand. I do not mean high-pitched, but too great, too glorious for man to hear or understand. Because of this, angel guides are known by their name of their charge while they are on the lower planes. I am known as Bernard's heaven guide, and he who has gone to the earth for you is known as Bernard's earth guide. Later, when you are entitled to wear the purple gown, you will be able to receive an impression of the heavenly language, just as animals receive an impression of man's language. What is the purple gown, and why do you not wear it? Each guide wears the gown of the same degree as his charge, she explained, answering my last question first. Did you not see that Stephen was wearing purple? When a man has made his reparation, has been clothed in the mystic robe, and has entered through the gates, when a man has met the Master Christ, his heavenly brother, then he comes forth clad in the purple gown. Is it known how he comes by it? Yes, the Christ himself clothes his younger brother. Ah, no wonder the mystic robe must first be cleansed, I cried, my heart beating with joy. For a while we mused together on the wonder that was to come. Then I asked, why is it called a mystic robe? Because it is a robe of mystery. Its fabric is that of the creative substance. Then that is why I saw all the colours vibrating and changing when I first saw the veil before the gate. Yes, and that is why the stuff has a name in the heavenly language which means the robe of the Great Mother. Chapter 10. Anxiety for the Angel. Suddenly, my musings were interrupted by the excited barking, and there was Rainbow, tearing down the last slope towards me. He did not pause in his headlong dash, but leapt high into my arms, where he wriggled enthusiastically, washing every inch of skin with his moist tongue ecstatically. How you have grown, Rainbow, I cried at last, lifting him to the level of my eyes for inspection. Bark, bark, he continued surely. He was in fine condition, plump and silky, and I turned to my companion gratefully. You have looked after him well. I gave him a caress from you every time I fed him, she smiled. After that we finished our journey with Rainbow, carried in my arms, but when my guide told me that I was nearly at my next visiting place, he jumped down and gambolled on ahead, giving shrill little cries as if he were calling to friends. That is just what he is doing, my angel answered my thoughts. Some of those he played with were coming here, so they told him all about it and arranged a meeting. Well, he will be happy enough. Where are we going now? We have arrived at the Hall of Books. Oh, good. Books always have fascinated me. I know your Earth Guide has often brought back to me a picture of you with a book in your hand or kneeling before your bookshelves making a choice. Often he has helped you by indicating which one to read for the day. Really, I had no idea that angels were as near to men as that. That is a secret hidden from the majority of men. Now come, she added, for you have to meet a man in here to whom you owe a debt of kindness. Of kindness, I echoed. I always tried to be kind. But man cannot always see what is the kind thing to do or how great is another's need. In this case, the man was longing for one with whom he could share a heavenly pattern, or, as it is called on earth, an inspiration. He was a writer, and his brain was crowded with a wonderful idea. For many years he had toiled and failed. The world seemed indifferent to the creations of his brain. At last he had almost given up, and then his idea flashed into his mind. If he could only get it clear by discussing it with someone. Then he met you, and you failed him. How? I queried sorrowfully. You would not listen to his explanations. You were not exactly rude, but you brushed his words aside and let him see that you were in a hurry to be gone. In that moment you represented to him the opinion of the world. If you were indifferent, so also would be the world. When you had gone, his hopes died, and he gave up. How terrible, if I had only known. Ah, said my guide, how many men say that when they come here and see. But men do not have to know. They have only to care about their fellow men as they care about themselves, to be interested, sympathetic, kindly. They do not need to know the circumstances, only to be kind. Men have been taught, but they will not heed. Love thy neighbour as thyself, I quoted. Yes, she agreed. The Master Christ taught men what to do to please the Father. They do not need to know the details. It is no excuse to moan afterwards. If only I had known. But they did know what the Master had taught, and they should have been sufficient. It was sufficient. Mine the fault entirely. Tell me how I can make amends. He is working on his idea now, she explained. That was the desire that most of all he yearned to have fulfilled, and it was a good desire, for it was a pattern from the Father. Go to him and ask him to tell you about it, but do not describe the circumstances that have brought you, for he is still clothed in white. Offer to help him. His name is Arthur. My guide was gone, and I walked on in solemn thought. Then I saw him. He was sitting with a group of men and women on the grass, and before them a meadow sloped down into the sunlit sea. On either side stately trees rose up, gently waving their branches in the breeze with a restful swishing sound. Behind the ground sloped steeply to a broad skyline. No one saw me, so I was able to stand and still and observe. It was the first time I had seen a group of people since I had come here, and I must say I began to yearn somewhat to join them, especially as I knew that this was the Hall of Books. It would be so easy. I had only to approach and ask to stay with them for a while, to become one of them. Then I knew my angel guides would meet again and agree sympathetically to wait until I had fulfilled my new desire. Of course they would be disappointed that the cleansing of the robe would be delayed. That was natural, but they would understand. Then, at the thought of the robe, my wavering ceased. I thought of its dark stains. True, I had been forgiven, but what had my guide said? The child is instantly forgiven by its mother for scrawling on the newly papered wall, because it is realized that the child knows no better, but the mark remains. Yes, it was something like that. I thought too of the bliss with the gates, of the purple gown, and of he who would clothe me in it. Then I nearly laughed aloud. How could I have thought for a moment that I would like to stay? How could I truly be happy, knowing the marks remain? And could I not come back at will after my term of reparation was done? As I straightened my shoulders and took a new grip on myself, it seemed to me that my guide spoke into my mind, though I did not see her. You gave us a bad moment then, she seemed to say, but we were almost certain that you would come through. You have forgotten one point in your decision. It is this. Your persistence and fidelity in going about the cleansing of your robe, despite all desires to linger on the way, is your proof to the Master that you love him more than all else besides. Be very sure that he knows and rejoices in you. Remember how he spoke once in the heart of a man on earth, urging him to value the love of the giver more than the gift of the lover. Yes, he knows. At this, such a sense of exaltation and mastery swept over me that it seemed as though I had never wavered, and could never waver until I had passed through the gates, learned all my lessons, and climbed on and on to the heights where wavering was no more. Ah, if all men of earth could stand where I stood now, if they could but see all the good effort helped to cleanse their robes, if they could see but their King, loving and patient, watching and approving, waiting to clothe them in purple, to welcome them and rejoice, how much easier would earth victories be then? But when they are victorious in the darkness without seeing, whispered my guide, then they can offer him a treasure that is denied to every angels. For angels see. Think of that. Quickly, I stepped forward toward the group. Chapter 11. The Hall of Books. Arthur, murmured my mind, may I have a talk with you? I did not speak the words in order that others should not be disturbed, but directed the thought into his mind. At once I saw him rise and withdraw from the others. In a moment he was beside me, gripping my shoulder in a warm clasp. Greetings, Bernard. I think you are the one I have been awaiting. He was a tall, thin man with a sensitive face and light brown hair. Why do you suppose that? Because I desire a companion to help me in some work I am doing, and up to now have not found him. That never lasts long here. But those others, could they not help you? He shook his head. They had not the knowledge I wanted or the experience on earth. Come, let us walk back to my place together, and we will talk as we go. Your place? He linked his arm in mine, and we began to pace slowly over the grass. I thought there were no buildings here. Oh, it isn't a building, he laughed. It's just a beauty spot that is especially dear to me. There I have chosen to do my work. Well, tell me about it, I invited eagerly. It is a book I wanted to write on earth, such a splendid theme. Somehow, and his face clouded for a moment, I did not even begin it there. But perhaps that was just as well. Books on earth and books here are very different. Why is that? I was watching his glowing face and wondered how I could ever have been so indifferent as to refuse to listen to his story. Well, books on earth are just books, as you know. They are born of man's brain, are printed and circulated, read by some, passed by others, and finally, in the majority of cases, forgotten and lost forever. But here, with the stuff at our disposal and the Father's pattern to follow, they live forever if they please him. Do you mean you use the creative substance to make books, the pages and the covers perhaps, but how the ideas? That is the Father's wonderful plan. When he has put a pattern into the mind, we take some of the stuff and seek a quiet place in which to think. Then we impress our thoughts upon the substance. If our work is imperfect, it dissolves and is lost immediately. But if it pleases the Father, he gives it life. How do you know when he has done that? Its form remains, he explained. Page after page begins to pile up until it is all complete, and then you know that you have fulfilled the desire of the Father, that it will live forever. Can anyone read the finished books? I asked. Oh, no one reads them, he said composedly. There is nothing to be seen on the pages at all. Nothing to be seen? I cried in amazement. And if no one reads them, what is the use of all the work? He laughed delightedly. It does seem a mystery at first, I know, but let me explain more clearly. When these books are finished, they remain in the hall. There is a great collection of them there. There must be, I marvelled. Keeps a few people busy classifying them, I suppose. Oh, he smiled, they are not classified either. They just remain in the hall until needed. It happens in this way. Suppose a man was resting in one of the other halls and he desired to read a book on a subject that interested him. His thought would draw the appropriate book toward him, and it would begin to impress itself upon his mind, much as though it were being read to him. At any time he could stop reading by a mere desire to do so, and then the book would be recalled to the hall until it was wanted again. Suppose two people wanted it at the same time. It can multiply itself an infinite number of times, if necessary. You see, it is composed of the stuff. Now, he went on, I want to tell you about the pattern that has been given to me. You will not mind? No, indeed, I cried heartily, feeling that my act of reparation was giving me great joy. Tell me all about it from the very beginning. This book, he began, was outlined in my mind while on Earth, and it was to be called 52 Stories for Saturday Nights. What a pity the title will have to be altered, I said regretfully, for of course there are no nights here, Saturday or otherwise. Ah, there you are wrong, for my book is intended for the Hall of Children. Are there days and nights there? Yes, everything to make the children feel at home, you see, he added. Many of these little ones die suddenly, often before they have received any teaching on heaven at all. Some have never even heard of the one who said, Suffer the little children to come unto me. So you see they have to be treated very gently and taught very gradually, or their little minds would grow bewildered. I can quite see that. And so they have day and night. And meal times and play times, he put in, and lesson times and treats, and of course devoted people to look after them. It is wonderful, I exclaimed, and what a privilege to be allowed to write a book to read to them. Yes, that is why I am glad now that I did not fulfill the Father's plan on earth. I shall be able to get it perfect here. Think of that. It may take me a long time, but oh, what joy I shall have working over it. Now I have met you and you are willing to help me, I have no regrets left. What happiness swept over me when my companion said that. Tell me how I can help you, and we will begin right away, I offered. Yes, in a moment. But we have arrived at my place now, so let us make ourselves comfortable. I had been so intent on our talk that I had not noticed the scenery, but now I realized that we had been climbing steadily, for we were on a great height. Looking back, I saw the long path winding down far below and merging into a belt of trees. Is it possible we could climb so high without noticing it? I asked in surprise. Oh, yes. Arthur stood by my side, looking down also. Here, we are so strong and the air is so stimulating, a steep climb is almost as easy as walking on the level. I took a few deep breaths of the delicious air. Well, now you come to mention it, I do feel a sense of extraordinary lightness, just as I used to feel on earth when I left off my topcoat on early spring mornings. It used to seem a little bit chilly at first, but soon there was such a sense of lightness and tingling health. We stood breathing deeply for a while in silence, and then Arthur laid a hand on my arm. Come and see my place. I think you're going to like it. He led me over the crest of the hill and around a clump of trees, stretching out a hand in the opposite direction to which we had come. Look, this is the view from my balcony. It was a beautiful prospect, and Arthur, who was watching my face, seemed very pleased with the surprise he had given me. Certainly I had never expected to see such a wide sweep, nor such a beauty crowded into it. The land sloping gently down from where we were standing, the grass sprinkled with the most beautiful profusion of flowers. On either side of us, tall trees provided a kind of sheltering wall, and following the slope with my eyes, I saw that it widened out, fan-wise, stretching away to the far, far distance, and merging eventually into a pearly sky. At the bottom of the first slope, a little stream ran across, then took a wide curve and followed the lines of trees to our left. Below was a scene which reminded me of a park on a private estate on earth, with its green lawns, flower beds, shady trees, rustic seats, and silver-gleaming ponds fringed with rushes. The flowers, in their variety of colours and the splendour of their grouping and shading, would have captivated an earth gardener. Using my heaven sight, which could adjust itself, I discovered to take in the details at a great distance. I saw that there were countless scenes of beauty making up the whole, little places of retreat planned with evidently loving care. In one corner was paved a square sheltered on three sides by a tall hedge, and in the centre was a well where the water dripped at intervals with a strange sonorous note, soothing and pleasing to the ear. As my eye wandered over all this beauty, it seemed as though the very fragrance of the flowers drifted up to us, as though the glorious colouring soothed the senses, inducing a feeling of peace beyond description. I could only stand and gaze and breathe, wondering at the sight, until Arthur once more drew my attention to himself. "Come and sit down. You can look into the valley while we talk." I followed him, throwing myself down in the shelter of a fringe of trees, and in that moment a vivid remembrance of Stephen came to me, for the trees were dripping the wondrously lovely stuff almost to the ground. It was the first time I had seen it here. "You certainly have found a beauty spot for your work." "It is the Hall of Gardens," he explained, stretching himself out on the grass and folding his arms under his head. "There many people build to the pattern of the Father, and it is a place of great happiness. There are some folk down there who have lived in cities all their lives, and though longing to grow flowers, have had to be content with a window box. Others, with the instinct for landscaping gardening, have had a tiny patch of backyard between two fences. You can imagine their joy, especially when they succeed and the Father gives it life. Then this is a kind of boundary line." "Yes, if there are boundaries. I came across this place almost as soon as I arrived, and it seemed ideal for study." "Well, now you must show me the contents of the study." "Yes, of course, for I do want your help. I have already completed the first story." "Oh, so you will be able to read it to me?" "Tell it to you," he corrected, smiling. "There." And he indicated a little piled-up drift of the stuff nearby. "It's a rough draft, of course. I shall have to put in a good deal of work on it yet, and even then I shall not be sure of perfecting it, but I am very happy. I have all eternity to work in it if I will." "Good. Then tell me the story," I invited, rolling over so that I could look down into the lovely valley. "I will not say a word until you have finished." "All right. As I said, this book is called 52 Stories for Saturday Nights, and the story will merely be headed First Saturday. Here goes then. Chapter 12. Arthur's Story. "Only by finding out how little we are can we know how great he is and learn to trust him," said the favourite auntie, closing the Bible gently. Jimmy looked sleepily at the ring on her finger. All fire and light and the golden glory. Golden light and fiery glory, lightning and fire and... "Why, he's dropped right off," said Mother. "Will you help me tuck him up?" "Only by finding out how little we are," said Jimmy's dream mind, and then crunch! Jimmy started up and began to look about him. What a funny place! There are 4 great trees set in a huge square beside him. They seemed to stretch right up to the sky. And even the sky was queer, for it had lines crisscrossing it, and the light came through squares. Then he jumped again, for a voice of thunder said, "Squawk!" Looking around, he found a great mountain of fur beside him, a huge tail curled on the floor. Whiskers longer than he was tall twitched at him, and 2 eyes like dinner plates opened wide. "Hello," said the mountain. "Are you a new kind of insect?" "I am not an insect." Jimmy felt too cross to be nervous. "I am a boy." "A boy?" The mountain stared, blinking so hard that the draft nearly blew Jimmy over. "Never heard of it. Boy. Well, I'm a mouse," he said, so proudly that Jimmy did not like to laugh. Instead, he said politely, "But I thought mice were small." "So that is the kind of silly thing a boy thinks." His companion looked down at him scornfully. "No wonder I have never heard of one." "Well," muttered Jimmy to himself, "to think," and then even his thoughts were stopped in his surprise, for he heard a great throbbing roar like a dozen aeroplane engines just overhead. "Flying in formation, I suppose," he mused half aloud. "Quiet," hissed the mouse angrily. "Follow me, quick." Like a flash, the mountain of fur moved and Jimmy darted after it and came to rest in the warm shelter behind its left foot. The throbbing came nearer and nearer. "Don't be frightened," chattered the mouse. "I will take care of you." This did not make Jimmy feel very safe because he could feel the mountain shaking. "What is it?" he asked. "Shh, a cat." Well, Jimmy listened with his mouth falling open. A cat making all that noise? From his shelter he saw a great wall of dark fur go by, so tall that he could not even see the top of it. They remained still for a long while after that. Then began another rumbling, very strange, yet somehow familiar. First there was a short, high rumble, then a pause, and then a long, low rumble. Then two rumbles together, high and low. "They always do that," explained the mouse, who seemed to be happy again now the cat had gone. "On and on, all day. Rumble, rumble, rumble. It's very queer." "But who are they?" Jimmy peeped out from his shelter but could see nothing. "They?" said the mouse, asking in surprise. "Do you mean to say you haven't seen the pink thing?" "The pink thing?" repeated Jimmy, staring. "Don't echo like that." His friend began to get quite cross. "Yes, it comes down from... Oh, it just comes down," he finished vaguely. "It has a saucer of milk in it sometimes, for the cat." "How very strange," Jimmy answered politely. "Why," the mouse cried excitedly, "you have two pink things just like that one. Only, of course, that one is very big." "Those are my hands," explained Jimmy, releasing one from the clasp with a great claw. "Hands? Well, what about those poles sticking out of them?" "Fingers," smiled Jimmy. He was beginning to feel quite superior now, but Jimmy was to learn that being proud usually means a fall, and this fall was very loud indeed. It made the floor shake. "What's that?" he gasped, jumping so far back he felt as though he were in a warm tunnel. "They always have them," mumbled his protector. "Sometimes black and sometimes brown. That is in the daytime, but in the dark... Here," he chuckled wickedly, "they are pink. Then if you run over them, there is such a squawk, much louder than mine," he had added admiringly. Jimmy was very puzzled at this description until he saw an enormous pair of shoes stamping over the floor with two great trees rising up from them, clad in navy blue. "Those are shoes." He put his hand up and prodded boldly, "with feet and legs in." Hush! But it was too late. The shoes stopped. One of the pink poles came down and rested close to a quivering nose. "Hello," rumbled a voice. "A mouse, eh? Here, come out and show yourself." "No, no, thank you." Jimmy heard a tremble of fear and his shelter began to shake. "Why not?" came the rumble. "Look, have a bit of cheese." "For me?" The mouse shivered with joy and his whiskers twitched longingly. "But I thought," and as he began to advance a little, "that they did not like us ever." "Ah," rumbled the voice, "that is because you and your brothers have such bad manners. Instead of eating one thing, you nibble ever so many, and you take things that are put away for tomorrow. Why, even boys are punished for stealing jam and cake sometimes." At this, Jimmy felt himself getting red about the ears. He was glad he could hide under his furry shelter. Only the other day, the pantry door slammed just as he had climbed to the highest shelf. "Come on," coaxed the big voice. "Eat your cheese. You would always find something to eat if you respected other people's property, you know. Why, everybody would like you then." Very slowly, Jimmy's shelter slid away from him, and then there was a long pause while he leaned against his friend's side, listening to the strange noises going on underneath. "I wonder if I make such a noise when I eat." Then the mouse moved. Jimmy toppled over, striking his head on a bristle sticking up from the carpet. "Well, goodbye," said his friend. "I must be off. Got to talk to the other fellows about good manners and free food." "Goodbye," said Jimmy, and "Hello," said the mother. "It is Sunday morning, son." He lay thinking as the sun slid into his bedroom window. Well, that was a nice dream. I hope I have one every Saturday night. Chapter 13. The Flying Fish. "That is capital," I cried, sitting up to look across at Arthur. "I believe you really live the character of Jimmy and forget all about Arthur for the time being." "I'm afraid I do," he confessed, looking a little shamefaced. "I always get absorbed in a story like that." A good thing you do, or you would not be able to absorb your hearers either. You really think so? You think it will please the kiddies? It certainly will, if I know anything about them. I like your original treatment in giving an insect's eye view of a commonplace thing. Will Jimmy appear in the other stories? No, he only introduces the stories. Arthur was sitting up, now clasping his knees. Each story is going to be told from the point of view of an animal, fish, or bird. Each must be authentic, for it is amazing how well up many children are in these matters, and each will teach a little lesson. What kind of lesson? Well, something to help in their education, you know. Only, of course, they must not be allowed to suspect it. Sometimes it will be a lesson in charity, in others' patience, generosity, or humility. So all the time they will be growing and being fitted to occupy a higher place in heaven. You're going to delight the kiddies and do great work for the Master too. Oh, I do hope so, Arthur said fervently. But I cannot start my work on the second story until I have acquired some more information. That is why I was glad to see you, for none of the others could help me. I thought a man could reach out for any information he wanted with his mind. Yes, but this is Earth information. As no one has learned this while on Earth, they could not give it to me, and I do want to get all my facts just right. In fact, they must be perfect in the end. I looked at his serious face and could not help comparing him with Stephen and Marie. These were both so light-hearted in their individual ways, but Arthur was exceedingly solemn, and then I reflected on the harm I had done him on Earth, and how a sensitive type like this would suffer far more than any other. Yet the Master has need of all, I mused, and despite his gravity he is undoubtedly very happy. Well, tell me what you want to know, I invited at last. I must confess my heart faltered a little at the thought that I might have to fail him, for I had never been very good at general information on Earth. And then I could have laughed with relief at the anticlimax, but Arthur leant toward me and asked, Do flying fish move their wings to get along in the air? Now that is something I really can tell you, for I was reading an article about them only the other day. At least, I suppose it was only the other day. One cannot be sure of time here. The article went into the whole question and even had photographs to prove it. Good. I thought you were the one to help me. Then eagerly, Now tell me all about it, every detail. I screwed up my eyes in an effort to collect my thoughts. It seemed so strange to be thinking back to Earth again, like looking into a deep shadow while standing in strong sunlight. The flying fish, I began at last, lashes its tail 3 or 4 times while under the water. This gives it motive power, and then it instantly rises into the air and coasts along. It does not move its wings to progress in mid-air, but drops to the surface of the water, lashes its tail again without submerging, and then rises on the wing. Eventually, of course, it drops below the surface and continues swimming. Good, good. Arthur was quite excited, and I could not help smiling. We sat for quite a long while talking after that, and even made arrangements to meet later in the Hall of Children. I felt very light-hearted and relieved, too, at the thought of the ugly mark cleansed from my robe. The remembrance made me start to my feet and bid my friend goodbye. He clasped my shoulder, and I his. The dear fellow was radiant, with a dreamy look in his eyes, which assured me that he would not even miss me when I had gone. Goodbye, and many, many thanks, Bernard. I turned and strode down the winding path. Chapter 14. Good news. It was when I drew near that I noticed the special radiance of my guide's face. She was all on fire with joy that poured out from her in rays, and it was impossible not to be touched by them and feel the heart lift in sympathy. You have something to tell me. You are getting very sensitive to thoughts, Bernard, she laughed. Indeed, we both laughed more than her words merited, but there was such an atmosphere of happiness between us that it seemed to inspire laughter. Tell me, I urged, when we had walked on a little way in silence, for I had realized that she had drawn her mental veil so that it was useless for me to reach out for the information. I have seen your Earth Guide. He has almost finished the work of reparation. There was so much love, congratulation, joy, yes, pride in her face that I was reminded of a mother looking at her newborn child on earth. The tears rushed into my eyes, and strangely enough, I was not ashamed of them. Instead of hastily brushing them away, I remained looking into her eyes, and I saw hers fill also. So we wept in sympathy, for sometimes heaven joy is too great to be borne unmoved, especially for one so newly come from earth. At last I asked, with a momentary shadowing, will it be very long before I have finished my term of reparation here? And will he be disappointed that I have not come to the end as soon as he? You have almost come to the end. That is why I am so happy. I can see your robe very nearly clean again. Can you see it all the time? Oh, how could you have been so gentle, so friendly, with that ugliness before your eyes? Remember, I can also see all you will be. I was comforted at once, and was just about to ply with questions when Rainbow came tearing into view, panting hard, with his tongue lolling out of one side of his mouth. He had grown into quite a big puppy, almost a dog, and it was all I could do to lift him up to the level of my face while he wriggled slow. He welcomed me, and then, pressing on my mind, came his account of all his adventures, the friends he had made, and all the exciting games he had played. My guide sat down to watch while Rainbow and I had a romp together. For a time I became as a child again, without thought or care, living in the excitement of the moment. When it ended, I began to realize why there were animals in heaven. If it were not for these times of rest and forgetfulness of the magnitude of the Father's plan, and the remorse for faults so clearly seen for the first time, it would press too heavily on those so fresh from earth. Solemnity, majesty, and glory may fill the heart with awe, but if at first they are unrelieved by forgetfulness, the capacity to realize them grows dim. Thus I glimpsed a little of the Father's love that, knowing the frailty of the children, gives them alternately lessons and play. Rested? Asked my guide, when Rainbow and I flung ourselves down at last beside her. I knew at once what she meant. Yes, I panted, it's marvellous. Tucking Rainbow's head in the crook of my arm, I fell into a kind of doze. A long time after that, I sat up and Rainbow imitated me, leaning hard against my side and blinking in the mellow light. My guide began her instructions at once without waiting for me to ask. Quickly she ran over the faults that were still outstanding. It appeared that I had kept silence when I should have owned to a fault. This had caused another to be suspected. Although, as no accusation had been made, I thought it was all right at the time. My guide pointed out to me the power of thought, explaining that a man could be as much saddened by thoughts as by spoken word. On another occasion I had repeated an ugly story that had been told to me. The story was true, but since the incident the wrongdoer had been sorry and made full reparation. Thus he had earned the Father's forgiveness, and I was shown that to speak of an incident that is closed in heaven's eyes is to flout the law of love. Another sin was pride, in that I had persisted in thinking myself superior to another. Actually, though below me in learning, he had progressed far in the ways of charity and could have taught me a great deal. Many similar faults were outlined to me, my guide gently pressing my hand the while, telling me so lovingly that it was impossible to mind. These sins, you know, she said at last, would only be called faults on earth, but here we make no distinction, calling every mark on the robe a sin. That helps men to grow in humility. Indeed, before they have that, they are fettered by pride. Am I humble yet? You are growing in humility. When you are at last clothed with the purple gown, you will have advanced a little further. But even then there are states of humility stretching far beyond your comprehension at the present time. Why is that? Because the nearer you come to the light of the Father, the deeper your humility grows. Is there no room for pride then, as men advance? None. No advancement can be made at all while pride stands in the way. As man advances in the cleansing of his robe, or later in the ascension towards the heights, one thought of pride is a looking back at the way he has come, and that means a stepping back. Men must ever look forward towards the vision of the Master Christ who walks before them, keeping their eyes on the faint rays of his glory, which is all that they are able to receive as yet. Through keeping their gaze upon him and following where he leads, they will draw near, through him, to the light of the Father. If any man love me, the Father will love him, and we will come and make our abode with him, I quoted. A problem occurred to me. Was I looking back then? Oh, I did not mean it in that way, she said quickly. For a man to look back to see how great are things which God has done for him is good, for thus he grows in humility. For a man to look back to see how great are the things he has done for himself is bad, for thus he grows in pride. Ah, Bernard, learn this well. To look back in pride is to turn back. To look back in pride is to turn back, I repeated. Yes, I will remember. Now let us speak of your reparation and how you may finish it. If you like, we will talk as we journey on. Yes, that will be best. I sprang to my feet, and with Rainbow running ahead, we started on our way. Chapter 15. Through the Halls. The time seemed to pass very quickly after that. Led by my guide, I went from hall to hall, meeting a great many people. To some I told the circumstances of the wrong I had done them, for these were purple-gowned. To others I merely offered my services. From all, without exception, I received a friendly welcome, and I began to glow in the warmth of this heavenly brotherhood. Although I was eager to be done, each reparation gave me happiness, and always my interest was held so completely that I felt no sense of weariness. In the Hall of Paintings I met a man who became a great friend. He was working with the stuff over the building of a flower and was full of enthusiasm over the pattern the Father had given him. With reverent care he took several colours of the creative substance and, placing one upon the other, arranged them so that the deepest shade, gleaming through the lighter ones, gave a colouring of true, unearthly beauty. When I expressed my admiration, however, he only cried regretfully, "But it is not like the Father's pattern." That was exquisite. I left him, marvelling that such beauty could be. In the Hall of Music I found a woman who I had known on earth. Vividly I remembered her little cottage home with a creaking piano, which was all she could afford, out of which she drew such an amazingly lovely tone. Here I was awestruck by her composition. The glorious tones filled the air with melting sweetness, rising higher and higher to a pitch that could not be heard on earth, and all the while the bass rolled forth majestic in triumph. In the Hall of Hobbies I found a man who had been a navvy. He had had a large family and many responsibilities. He had had little leisure in his long earth life. Here he was fulfilling all his hidden wishes, working on some minute models of aeroplanes and ships. "These are for the children," he told me, holding up a model scarcely bigger than a thumbnail. "Did you want to do that work on Earth?" I queried. "Yes, all the time I was swinging a pickaxe," he laughed. My greatest experience was in the Hall of Children. This was a little heaven in itself. It brought to my mind the combined dreams of the child lovers throughout the ages, comprising all the magic of the past with the improvements and inventions of later times. It was like a great toy town set in the midst of the country, with flowers that little hands could touch, pick and arrange in bowls, furnished with trees that sturdy limbs could climb. There were sports of all seasons, so that a thought could carry one to a snow-clad slope or a wood standing deep in bluebells. No little one was ever alone, for nurses, companions and teachers were always devotedly awaiting a need, eager to fill it at once. The children lived wholly in an atmosphere of love, and thus learned quickly to give out love to each other. Looking at the little ones running about so gaily, I began to wonder if they ever missed their mothers, and immediately, my thought reaching out, I knew. Those little ones whose happiness would not be complete in any other way are taken on a visit to a plane between, as it is called. Here, while the mothers' bodies sleep in their beds on earth, they meet, talk and play with their children. For this meeting place is set midway between earth and heaven. The children accept these meetings and partings quite naturally, just as they accepted their mother's absences when shopping or when they themselves went to school. Here they tell mother all their happiness, how much they still love her. Thus many a mother wakes on earth with a smile on her lips and a happy thought. What a lovely dream I have had. It has made my little Darlene seem very close to me. Yes, all this I saw in the Hall of Children. As I was preparing to journey on, my guide pressed a message on my mind. Come, for your work is done. I sped towards her and very quickly found myself again in the hall of reception. There, walking toward me, with their swinging, graceful stride, were my two guides. I found that there was a change about them that I could not at first define. Then, walking swiftly between them, I began to understand that it was eagerness. I was suddenly reminded of my birthday, when my parents had prepared some treat that they knew would delight me. Each would make an attempt at gravity as they led me to the hidden package, yet their eyes would twinkle and dance revealingly. Being wise, as all small people are in such matters, I would tactfully ignore these signs and portray as much surprise, eventually, as they evidently expected. These ideas flashed through my mind as we walked on. Although silent, my guides continually glanced towards me and then at each other, much in the way of parents when their child takes his first steps or gurgles initial conversations in a language of its own. My heart began to beat fast and my hopes rose high. Could it be? I recalled my first hunger, which had remained in my heart all the time. I thought over all the way I had journeyed, the people I had met, the acts of reparation I had made. It seemed pure happiness at the time, and yet, had I been happy? Was I really satisfied, and the hunger stilled? Then I knew that I had indeed hungered all the time, that nothing would ever satisfy me unless I first had found my master, that all relationships of earth were as nothing to this divine relationship, because it was man's eternal heritage to be an heir of God and co-heir with Christ. I strained my eyes for a first sight of those gleaming gates with a yearning that went ringing out over the plains, into the very presence of the much desired. How long, O Lord, how long? Chapter 16. Purple Gown. All men come to know this hunger in the end, my earth guide said. At first many of them think they want other things, the company of friends, the fulfillment of wishes. At last, when they have had all these and their hunger is unappeased, they seek him who their soul loveth. Then they come to know the truth, that it is only when they have seen him and may return to him that these other joys can satisfy. It is then that they go back and enjoy the fulfillment of their dreams 100-fold. I scarcely heeded him. Speeding as we were on our journey, we seemed to make little progress, but at last a faint shining in the distance told me that we were drawing near. I was so eager that I never took my eyes off those gates until we were standing before them, and then my eagerness melted away. I turned, trembling, to my companions. Dare I enter in? Have you not helped in the cleansing of your robe? But what is even a cleansed robe before such glory? What indeed? But be of good courage. The Great Mother will cover you with her cloak. Her cloak? I echoed. I thought I had to wear my own robe. You have, but remember that your robe is made of the creative substance, and this, in the heavenly language, is called the robe of the Great Mother. So you see, your robe is part of her robe. Think how I have stained it. What will she? Think also that she is a mother. That is the nature of her cloak. It is the cloak of her motherly love. With this she will enfold you so that your own robe will shine through and yet be enhanced by the brighter shining of hers. That is how all men dare to enter in. Who is this Great Mother? I asked. Do you think that God the Father would leave his children without a mother? That was all he would say, but somehow it satisfied me. At last my guides cried, She has come! And with their reverent cry came the might of a strong wind, the dazzling light of 1,000 earth suns, and the combined fragrance of all the flowers that are. I would have fallen on my face, but in this mighty presence I was caught and held so strongly, yet with such warmth and tenderness, that all my doubts and fears, all my shame and remorse, all my pains and hunger, melted quite away. I could only lie in the embrace of the Great Mother and let her carry me where she willed. For a long time it seemed I remained thus, and then the sense of movement ceased. I opened my eyes and found myself on my knees beside the beloved Master. He was looking down at me, and I was looking up at him, and all else was forgotten except the beauty and the rapture of it. Did we speak any words, he and I? I do not know. Perhaps that I whispered, "Master," over and over, and he murmured, "Son." The words seemed to mingle and merge into a kind of chant, yet over and above this chant, and deeply beneath it, we spoke without words, going fully into the past years I had spent on earth, on the lessons I had learned, and how these could be used in heaven. This time there was no need for any sorrow or shame, for in all that searching memory there was no sin to be seen and no mark of any kind upon the gleaming robe. I went on gazing up at him. All my thoughts and ideals of beauty, gentleness, and love were as nothing compared with that which I saw. Awed and enraptured, I knew that all my conceptions of strength, justice, and truth had been as murky reflections on a shadowed pool. And then he gathered me into his embrace and blessed me. In that moment I knew I was clothed in the purple robe, that an impression of the heavenly language had been given me. I knew that he and I would never be parted again, but that I would walk with him forever, finding him always present in that realm within my heart, once so misty, now so concrete and real. "We will come and make our abode with him," sang my soul. All about me gathered the purple gowned with words of congratulation. Foremost among them was Stephen, with that light in his eyes which I now understood so well. He seemed to have moved away from the place of meeting, yet he was with me, close, close. He smiled at me, and I at him. Breathing deeply, I drew of his strength, and I knew that I would never be weak, sad, or lonely again. At the outer fringe of the circle waited many who were clad in white. They all fell on their knees for a blessing. For a moment I drew back, startled, but the Master lifted and guided my hand over those bowed heads. For a long while I seemed to journey on alone, wrapped in my blissful dreams. And then my two guides joined me to say farewell. "You do not need us now that you have seen him," they said. And when I asked what they were going to do next, "We go to receive a newcomer."